Welcome to the EchoCast. I am Bon, and this is a podcast about video game news, speculation, reviews, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week we'll be talking about the Xbox Developer Direct, Dead Space's remake, the day before drama, and much, much more, like legitimately a lot. A few things before we get started. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform of choice, and if you're on Spotify or iTunes, please review the show. On YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment with your thoughts, or just say hello. A huge thanks to supporter level patrons PK, The Dawn, Caged Nephilim, and a special thanks to producer level patron Hassan. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, as well as getting ad-free episodes, please check out patreon.com/BonDiesel, and you can check out the $1, $5, and $10 tiers there. Gaming news, let's jump right into it because there's a lot to talk about. The Xbox Developer Direct. We had 5 games show, even though they only said that 4 were going to be there. We had Redfall. This was an interesting showing to me. They showed a pretty good amount of gameplay, it seemed like, and tried to show basically like a snippet of all of the different types of game modes or activities. And it's weird. A lot of people thought this game originally was going to be like Left 4 Dead, but with vampires. And it looks like some of the side mission stuff may be like that, but that the main missions and the main activities will be more narrative and give you more options to like sneak or basically just do whatever you want and however you want to do it. Either single player or co-op. Everyone can pick the same character if they want or not. There was rumors that it was giving like Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 3 vibes. And I can kind of see that. I'm just curious to how it's actually going to feel. I will say, like, visually, I'm pretty unimpressed. It's so hard to give that developer crap because they've made like really good games. Like there shouldn't really be question in whether or not they have the resume to make a game that deserves the attention Redfall is getting. I just kind of wonder, like, are people really looking for a vampire game, which parts of it is it's a zombie game. Are people really looking for this? There's been issues with the way like progression works with co-op, that basically only the host gets progression. Everyone else is just there to help them, basically. So I'm going to play it. It's going to be on Game Pass. I have Game Pass, so I'm going to check it out, and I may end up really, really liking it. But I do have to admit that like the aesthetic, I'm not really sold on. The way the gameplay is playing out, what we've seen just looks fine to me. I'm just not like super excited about it. I don't like that they initially revealed it with a trailer that wasn't realistic at all. It was, had like an artsy style to it, but like the characters and stuff still had like a realistic aesthetic and had like texture and stuff. And now that we're seeing the game, it's like borderline cartoony. I saw someone else talking about how the textures and the art style seems like it can't decide if it wants to be realistic or cartoony. And so it lands somewhere in the middle. But what's hard about it is that your brain sees textures and designs that haven't really committed all the way to one or the other, and so it just looks kind of bad, at least to me. So and the frame rate didn't look super good on this demo. I'm hoping that it's just an unoptimized demo, but we'll have to wait and see. The Minecraft game, I believe it was Minecraft Legends, was really interesting. It's like a co-op, sort of like real-time strategy, 4v4 Minecraft game, it's one of those things that it's going to come out. I'll fire it up. I'll play it because it looks interesting. I don't know if I'm going to be totally sold on it, but I want to check it out because it does lean more towards my personal preferences and stuff like that for games. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But it looked great, and I thought the reception to it was really good. And so it was to Redfall as well. I saw multiple people who I think have been pretty suspect of Redfall see this developer direct and come on the other side of being like, I'm not completely sold, but I'm a little sold. Like, I'm more sold than I was before, which is the goal. The Elder Scrolls Online presentation just went completely over my head. I am not in that world at all. I will not play this for a minute. But it's cool that I think they talked about, I think, the 20th expansion to that game, which I knew it was big and it had been around for a while. I did not realize it had been around that long and was that big. Paris Lily on Twitter, who's done a bunch of gaming stuff with Kinda Funny and others, called it the Divorce DLC, where if you had access to all of that DLC for the first time ever, you may end up getting a divorce because you'll be spending so much time playing. So it looked good. Like that looked like, to that community, it was a really good thing, and so that was exciting to see. Forza, they did show more of that. I mean, I think visually will end this year, and I would be amazed if Forza isn't on people's list at least as like the most impressive looking game. I assumed that like in photo mode and stuff like that, we'd be seeing like ray tracing and stuff like that. They are claiming on Xbox Series X, 4K, 60 FPS, real-time ray tracing. There are qualifiers there. There will be elements that will have ray tracing. I imagine like reflections on the car are going to have ray tracing. They obviously aren't going to ray trace the entire player world. They're going to use like old school reflection tech and stuff for a lot of stuff. But it seems like, at least for some of the stuff in the game, while you're playing, they'll be doing real-time ray tracing, which is exciting. That's really cool. I think that they talked about a roster of like 500 cars at launch, which is crazy. 800 different custom modifications, which is crazy. Yeah, I'm going to get stuck in this. The big letdown with this was that Redfall, Minecraft, and ESO all got release dates, and Forza got a coming in 2023 date. And the reason that's significant, and it's a conversation about Starfield as well, is that last summer when they did a big showcase, Xbox did, they made a big point of saying these games are coming in the next 12 months, which would end this June, right? And some people dogged their show because they're like, we want to see what's coming next, not just for the next 12 months. But then some people liked it because they were just focusing on what's coming soon. So the issue that we're having is that people are concerned that Forza and Starfield aren't going to make that next 12 months, especially Starfield because it was delayed. And there's a big concern basically that it would just look bad on Xbox to not even be able to hit that. On the other hand, they need good games. They need to put out good games. They just can't have another Halo Infinite situation, which was a good game that people liked, but they didn't give themselves the time to properly finish it and prepare for the live service support. Now, I don't know if Forza is supposed to get live service support. I assume it is because I believe this is the last named. They aren't going to do numbered Forzas anymore. They're going to build off of this one. But Starfield will probably have some DLC, but I'm not expecting it to be like a live service game because the other mainline Bethesda games haven't been. We don't talk about Fallout 76, and that wasn't really a Bethesda game. It's a long story. So Forza looks amazing. If it doesn't come till July, August, September, I don't really care. I just want it to be good. But that does mean that in June, they're probably going to announce the next 12 months. And that will be interesting because in that next 12 months, from June 2023 to June 2024, I'm expecting Hellblade 2, probably Fable, maybe. I don't know, like there's other games and they're going to have to start hyping those up. And if they still have Starfield and they still have Forza kind of waiting in the wings, it's going to be weird because, they once those games come out, they have to start moving on to the next ones and getting excited for those. So I'll be interested in that. And then the big surprise, which I'm just so excited to talk about, was Hi-Fi Rush. So Tango Gameworks, who had previously made horror games, and that Ghostwire Tokyo game that came out and was like pretty lukewarm. People weren't super excited about it. And I think it was a PlayStation exclusive, even though Tango Gameworks is a ZeniMax studio that is now owned by Xbox, but they had the previous agreement for the exclusivity. It's a mess. I believe it's on Xbox now, but they went from doing these, The Evil Within and the Ghostwire Tokyo, to doing Hi-Fi Rush, which I'm just going to say it, and I've seen other people say it, that this may be the single most impressive looking game visually I've ever seen, period, ever. And that's a weird thing to say, especially from me, because it's like kind of got like an anime style. It's animated, and it's a Tango Gameworks is a Japanese studio, and it's interesting. What it looks a lot like to me is the Spider-Verse movie. And I guess, so the world is being rendered in 60 FPS, but the characters are being rendered in 30 FPS. So they have like kind of it would look bad if it wasn't on purpose, but it's on purpose. They did this with Spider-Verse as well. And it gives the characters a really unique movement style, and it looks so good. And what's so wild about the game is that between the cutscenes and the gameplay, I don't know if they're using pre-rendered cutscenes or if they're in engine. It's hard to tell. I don't know, but it looks so good. And beyond that, the cutscenes are just so good, and they're fun and they're vibrant. The world design is bonkers. The character, the voice acting is just superb. It's dead on. It's so, it just sucks you in. The character designs look so good. Peppermint is a babe. Like, it's such an interesting thing. It's so wild that they were able to keep this basically under wraps. There was a rumor shortly before the show that Tango Gameworks was going to have a secret reveal, but the actual game never got leaked, and it's so good. And I didn't even talk about the gameplay yet. The gameplay, the best way I've seen people describe it is a rhythm-based Devil May Cry. And that feels about right. And what I like about it is that, like, Metal Hellsinger came out last year, and it was a rhythm-based game. It was a rhythm-based, like, Doom style game, and you had to shoot on rhythm. But with Metal Hellsinger, you had to shoot on rhythm, and you had to be on rhythm to make any progress. I have no rhythm. I'm terrible at stuff like that. And so I thought Metal Hellsinger was terrible. I thought it was a bad game. I didn't just think it was like, it was a bad game for me. I did not find it enjoyable at all. And that stinks because it should have been good. And I know other people liked it. Hi-Fi Rush has the rhythm thing, and it's got combos and parrying and quick time events, and it's crazy. But the big thing is that the majority of the combat, your character attacks on the rhythm no matter what you do. If you're off rhythm, they still attack on the rhythm. But if you are on rhythm with the character, you do more damage, you build up more power and things like that. So it rewards you for excelling, but it doesn't punish you for not being perfect. Whereas I felt like Metal Hellsinger punished you, and it just made it not very fun, especially if you weren't very good at it. And so, beyond all of the things I already said were amazing about the game, the combat feels great. The character movement feels good. The dodging, the jumping, the double jumps, using light and heavy attacks. It has a feature where it's all on a rhythm, right? And so like some attacks you hit, X, X, you have to wait a beat and then hit Y, Y, Y on every other beat, and then you get some big powerful attack, and you can buy new attacks and stuff. It's just, I'm only a couple hours into it, and I started playing Dead Space, which I'm going to talk about later, so I may not play it for a bit, but it is just, I mean, like, I've already seen people who like aren't Xbox fans, who are pretty skeptical about Xbox in general, talking about how this game, from a gameplay, story, character, and visual and sound, God, the music is so good. And even like the music that is like for the game is great, but then they have a bunch of licensed tracks that are just fantastic. And like, I've already seen people who aren't like big Xbox fanboys, like not even a little bit, who have come out and basically said that there's no way this game won't be on their top 10, and that a lot of people think this will already compete for Game of the Year. And if it seems like every year there's one like AA or ND style game that makes that list, and this one could be it. Now, its biggest issue is that it's coming out so early in the year, and these games tend to get forgotten as time goes on. But like a good point I saw people making is that if Hi-Fi Rush isn't a top 10 game for people, if there's 10 games that pushes Hi-Fi Rush off the top 10 for the average gamer, then this will be one of the best years in gaming ever. And it could be, right? But like that, this game is so good that there's people who like are fairly skeptical of Xbox and stuff like that, who are already like basically positive this will be a top 10 game for them, and maybe much, much higher. It's just so cool. It was like a shadow drop for this type of game was so perfect. Maybe they could have hyped it since the summer, or the Game Awards or something. Maybe they could have shown it there. I think they made the right choice, and I'm very impressed. And then the final thing, it's on Game Pass. Obviously, it's a first-party Xbox game. But if you're on PC, or if you don't have Game Pass, it's only $30. I'm seeing people say it's between a 10 and 15-hour story, which is solid. That's good. And it's one of the best-looking games ever made, and it's great. Like, it's so crazy. Like, this game could have been $60 or $70, and it's not. And so like, there's almost no excuse to not play it unless you don't have Game Pass and you hate rhythm games. I'm not saying you're not good at them. Maybe you're not good at them, but you like the idea. You can play this game if you're just okay at it. But like, it's so good. At least go watch someone play it. It's just so fun visually. The cutscenes are so good. I was watching someone play it last night, and there's like a dream sequence that happens that is wild. And I haven't even heard anyone talk about the ending. Like, I don't want it to be spoiled, but I am curious to what it builds up to and how people feel about the ending. Does it set up a sequel? Is this going to be a one and done? Because, you would assume Tango Gameworks is going to go back and do like something more in their style. Maybe, who knows? But I'm really excited for this. You should be too. Check out Hi-Fi Rush. Okay, I just had mentioned it, but the Dead Space remake has released as of Friday here. So reviews and stuff dropped on Thursday, and it's being regarded pretty well. So the Metacritic is 89 out of 100. And it's only in the 80s because of a few reviews that drug it down. Most of the reviews I've seen are 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, like extremely good reviews. People referencing the visuals, the updates to the original game, but still the homage to the original game, the improved systems, the improved mechanics, getting rid of things that didn't work in the first one, adding more modern systems and stuff like that. A voice protagonist, and then it came out, after it released, as of today, that there's a secret ending that's new that you can attain, and there's a Game Plus mode available day one. So once you beat it, you can jump right back in with like level 6 armor, which I assume the max armor you can get during the game is 5, plus a new type of enemy and the secret ending that you can get. So very impressive. If you just listen to the reviews, I put in about an hour today, earlier today during my lunch period, and I'm not a spooky gamer guy. This stuff, like, it makes me real anxious and stuff, but so far I'm loving it. I'm sure I'm only through a pretty small part of the game, but it feels good. The dismemberment of the enemies like feels really good. Visually, it's they did I've seen talk about it, but I saw it myself. They have a really cool system where the enemies are these like morphed humans, so they'll have like these like tentacles made out of like limbs, but they still have flesh on them, and they still have like some of the remains of the humans on them. So when you shoot them, it's very, very detailed, that like if you hit them in the lower arm once, it like strips away the flesh and only leaves bone, and then you shoot it again and it chops that limb off there, and it does that for their whole body. And apparently as the game goes on, there's weapons that like literally will like explode all the flesh off of them, and all that's going to be left is like a little bit of tissue and bones, and then you can shoot their bone. Like, it's creepy, it's mushy, it's really good. I'm really enjoying it. My history with Dead Space was weird. I worked at GameStop in college when the games came out, and so I remember like checking out Dead Space 1, being way too much of a pansy about it and not being able to play it because I was just too scared, and returning it and hardly ever playing it. So like for me, it's a mostly new experience, and so far I've been very impressed. I think I've seen people say that if you're a Dead Space fan and you're expecting like a whole new experience, maybe it's not for you, but that for most people, it's a good opportunity to play this game in a more modern way. Basically, I saw it compared where if Resident Evil 2 is the best remake, which probably is, and say something like The Last of Us Part 1 is on like the not as good side, this is in the middle and leaning towards Resident Evil 2. So maybe it's not as impressive as that was, but it's pretty darn close. So, and then I've seen conversation about this too, of like, will this be game of the year for some people? And it may be. I think this will, at least like for me, knowing the games that are coming this year, will probably at least be top 10, maybe a top 5. I do count remakes, and I'll even count some remasters if they're new to me. So like I counted like 2 years ago, the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, it wasn't eligible for Game of the Year from like real publications, but for me it was Game of the Year over Halo. Because it was new to me. I never played it before. And that's probably where Dead Space is going to sit for me. But I think you may even see some bigger publications, because it's an actual remake from scratch, give some nods to Dead Space, at least as a top 3 or top 5 game. And from what I've seen so far, it deserves it. I'm really impressed so far. So, well, okay, what am I not impressed by? What I am not impressed by, and I have to admit, it's not like I don't enjoy talking about it, is The Day Before is probably, and this is legally, I'm only speculating this, I don't think The Day Before is a real game. I didn't the day before, and I don't think so the day after either. So if you didn't pay attention to it, this Day Before game is this Last of Us, The Division kind of mashup looking online MMO survival zombie game that a year and a half, 2 years ago got a lot of attention for a trailer they put out that, like, if you didn't look at it very closely, it looked like they made like basically The Division but into a zombie game, but with like the feels of The Last of Us. Now, what I will tell you is that if you go back and look at the trailers they've put out, one, they're completely scripted trailers. There's no gameplay. We have not seen a single second of actual gameplay from this game yet. Let's make this very clear at the beginning. We have not seen any gameplay yet. I know we've seen trailers and we've seen simulated gameplay. We have not seen gameplay. And if you look really closely at the gameplay, it looks bad. The textures are bad. The animations are wonky. There's one trailer that takes place in a mall in what looks like New York City. It's a pretty obvious ripoff of the Division 1 and its level it had in the shopping mall. If you look closely at that trailer and you look at the set decoration of that level of the mall, it looks awful. It's repeated textures everywhere. It's empty. There's no just like grit around. It's like too clean and pristine. It looks terrible. But people don't see that. They see the action. They see the shooting, the talking, all that. So that's what the day before is. So it has been delayed, I think, twice already. It was supposed to come out in 2022. I think it was supposed to come out like early, like summer of 2022. Got delayed to November, got delayed again to March, and has now been delayed till November again. After it was unlisted from Steam, initially the developer said that it was an error on Steam. Then they came out and said that shortly after they debuted the game a couple years ago, someone else copywrote the name in the United States, which why they would have put out a trailer for a game they didn't own the rights for. Kind of weird to me. Then they said that they were delaying the game due to the copyright issues because they weren't sure how long that would take to figure out. And they said that they couldn't release gameplay. They were supposedly going to release actual gameplay like this week, like very soon. Oddly enough, right around the time this delay happened. And then the final thing came down in that they said, no, we aren't delaying just because of the copyright thing. We were planning on delaying before that. And basically they assured everyone our game is definitely real. Once it's out, you'll understand. So like the reason I'm so annoyed about this game. So if you look on Steam, over the years, almost every week, there's a new open world survival game that promises the world and then comes out in like alpha state and it's terrible and the devs aren't good enough to do what they meant to do and it sucks. They're a dime a dozen, these games. You can look on Steam Early Access and stuff. These games are all over the place. And literally there's like a new one every week and they all promise the world and none of them ever do well. Like literally, I don't think any of them have ever succeeded in a large way. And to me, this was just another one of those. But what drew my attention to it was that I'm a big The Division fan, and the Division creators, the people who are still creating content for that game, God bless them. Some of them suck, and they do not deserve blessings. And they were mostly who I'm talking about here. A bunch of Division creators really pushed this game hard and being like, oh, the game that we always wished Division was. Look at this Division killer and all this stuff. And they pushed it really hard, even though to me from the outset, this game looked like a scam. It looked way too good to be true. Just like every one of these early access, Steam, MMO, survival, whatever you want to describe these games as, they are always too good to be true. And this was clearly going to be another example of that to me. And I saw these people pushing this game and hyping it up and acting like, oh, it's the game we always wished The Division was, which is so frustrating to me because The Division 1 and 2, while imperfect, are like extremely impressive and like technological marvels. If you consider everything that has gone into them. And so when you take this obvious like scam game, this, what people have been calling it, like fakeware or whatever, I forget, and try to compare it, it just drives me nuts because as imperfect as The Division is, one, it exists, and two, it's pretty damn good. And I don't think that's the fact for the day before at all. And so I've always had a little grudge against it because of that. But then they just keep doing stuff that just keeps reinforcing this over and over again. And the studio, the developer, it's fantastic without an A. They were in Russia. They were in like Siberia. And then they moved to like Thailand. And then I think that's where their studio is now. But their publisher is in Australia. they're weird. The whole situation seems really weird. Their previous projects are like mobile games, and games that they kind of did the same thing with, where they kind of promised the world and then just kind of pooped out something and moved on. I don't know. To me, it's just a big sham, and I do not believe in the day before. And I do not trust them when they say, "Oh, we'll show you all. You know, this game is real and it's amazing." We'll see. Battlefield 2042. That's a 2042 is a game that it was pretty rough when it released, and then it got really good really quick. But so many of the big names and then the big voices in gaming had already turned on it, which was like fair to a point. I still to this day think that Battlefield 2042 was supposed to be like a free to play extraction game. And then and then as evidenced by that mode that released, it was bad. And so they realized probably in the last 6 months, we can't do this. This sucks. This isn't good. We need to do a traditional Battlefield game. And they simply didn't have time to do that. Well, as evidenced by this patch that's coming out next week for 2042, it seems like a year plus later, we're finally going to get the 2042 I think people wanted. So they did a hero system basically, or a specialist system, where you could pick from like these like 12 different specialists that all had these like special skills, and they had dumped the class system, which is iconic to Battlefield in my opinion. Well, this next patch is bringing back the class system. I need to read more into it to really understand, are the specialists just going to turn into different skins for the classes, or are they still going to be their own thing plus the classes? I admittedly, I didn't have time to do a deep dive in it, but just them bringing back the class system is super cool. I also saw a bunch of stuff that they're basically they're trying to just mold this game into probably what we all wanted a year and a half ago when the game came out. I've put a ton of, I've got my money's worth from 2042 already, and I plan on playing it more, especially with these changes, because I dropped off Call of Duty. The DMZ mode was fine. The multiplayer was good, but I'm always good for a couple months and then I bounce. But the Battlefield games to me have just always offered so much more of a big experience. Like, even though Call of Duty has its like big team battle or whatever, it's just not the same. It doesn't feel right to me. And so 2042 getting its stuff together, I would say about every 2 months it brings me back, and I'm always happy to come back. So if you're interested, if you bought it and then haven't paid attention, it seems like they're making big changes. And if you are in like a drought right now of games somehow, I think it's worth going back and visiting. Even though I have stuff to play, I'll definitely be coming back for at least the next couple weeks to play. Forspoken released, I believe that was last week, and I can't remember if I covered it. I don't think I did. It came out with a Metacritic score of 66. This game was weird. I feel like when it first got announced, it had some good favor, but the more people looked at it, and then the more that released in their marketing, it just seemed like it's just weird. It's being made by Square Enix. It's an exclusive game to Sony. I believe it's eventually going to come to all the platforms, but it's just like, a lot of the dialogue they showed in the previews was not very good. The game, I don't think really looks very good. I think it looks kind of bad and plain. It looks like an Unreal demo. It looks like an Unreal Engine demo to me. And then it released, and there's some people who are like really repping it, who are really saying like, "Oh, this is a great game." The people who are hating on it are just caught up in the hype or whatever. But it seems like most people are like, yeah, this isn't really that good. What's interesting about Forspoken is I've seen a lot of talk about, you can tell there's a really good game in here, but it's been hard to extract that good game, which I think is an interesting take. I think it's interesting that it seems like we've seen that a lot. One of the most interesting comparisons I've seen is when you listen to the reviews of Forspoken. If you're a Mass Effect fan and you went through the Mass Effect Andromeda debacle, the way that Forspoken is being talked about is a lot like Andromeda. It has a very similar vibe, where there's good elements. Some people like some stuff, some people don't. Overall, it's kind of a disappointing game, but it has things that are good. It's really interesting how similar the conversations are between them. So I know it's a game I have no interest in. It's also got that like magic-y element, which I'm just not, that's not my type of game. So I was never interested really. But then a lot of the dialogue and stuff they've shown has just been awful. And one of my favorite things I saw people saying like, well, the dialogue is a lot like the Marvel movies and stuff, and people love those. Yeah, but that's also like one of the biggest things people criticize at this point about Marvel is how the dialogue's not great. And then I also saw people be like, well, you can turn down how often the dialogue happens. So I'm just going to throw it out there. If you make a game that has your character speaking to its wristband, and as part of the options, you have the ability to turn down how often they talk, there's probably something wrong there. That's all I'm going to say. You probably realize there's something wrong there, but that's just me. Okay, so for our Mass Effect news for the week, Mac Walters has left BioWare. So Mac Walters was at BioWare for 19 years. They were a writer for Mass Effect 2 and 3. They were the director for Anthem, and they were the director for Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Most recently, Mac had been moved to Dragon Age. I think it's notable that Mac was working on Dragon Age and not working on the next Mass Effect. And on Dreadwolf, Mac was the production director. So, there are a few statements made by BioWare, by Mac himself, that they're moving on to a new position. There was a lot of fretting about Dragon Age with this, or people being like, oh, there goes another developer, because over it's like 6 or 7 year development cycle at this point. Gosh, probably 8 years that Dreadwolf has been worked on. They've lost a ton of talent, including like Casey Hudson, Mark Dara, now Mac Walters. The production director, it seems like, is just kind of like an efficiency person, or someone who's just kind of making sure all the pieces are working together. I'm sure Mac had some input on the story and the writing and stuff, because that's what Mac, that's what their history was in. But I don't seem like this seemed like it was that big of a deal. The fact that there's no production director job listing on BioWare's website means that they probably replaced Mac as soon as he left with someone who was probably waiting in the wings. And if anything, I almost kind of wonder if they kind of stuck Mac on this project knowing that they were going to head out. I've seen people talk about like, oh, is this the bad thing for Mass Effect? Because you would assume that after Dreadwolf came out, Mac would probably get moved to the Mass Effect game. Probably not. I think these departures are really interesting because people are obviously not happy with where BioWare was with like Anthem and Andromeda, even Inquisition to a point, even Mass Effect 3 to a point. And so I think it's interesting that when you see some of these vets leave who worked on all those projects, people throw their hands up and go, oh no, the sky's falling. When like to me, who's a newer fan to these series, I'm like, they probably need some new blood. Like this probably isn't a bad thing. You want to have some of the vets there to have that like soul of the studio and those old games and stuff. But it's also not a bad thing to have new people, to have new blood working on these games, to give different perspectives and to try to prevent the issues of the past. What's exciting is that like the Mass Effect game probably has people working on it who love the trilogy, were disappointed by Andromeda, and now they are working on the next game. And so hopefully they can have that different perspective and prevent that issue from happening again. So Mac Walters, obviously you don't want to lose a vet like that. That's always a bad thing in some capacity. But I don't think it's the sky is falling moment that some people made it out to be. Now, as for Dreadwolf, I've seen people being like, oh, I think it's going to get delayed till 2024, blah, blah, blah. I think this game comes out like this summer or this fall. But if you look at the last 2 or 3 big games and even the upcoming games that EA has, they aren't advertising or marketing these games until like a month before they come out. I assume that's because of COVID, and they're probably still having delays. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they'll do like an EA Play during this June around E3 Summer Game Fest. I don't know, but I think Dreadwolf comes this year. And I think it comes much sooner than people think. I wouldn't be surprised if over the summer they start up a big marketing campaign, and then by late summer, early fall, we are playing Dreadwolf, and they start moving all those devs over to Mass Effect, and they start working on the next Mass Effect. If you're not watching the video, I was pumping my fist. In other Mass Effect news, Mass Effect 2's birthday was on January 27th, the day I'm recording this. So 13 years of Mass Effect 2. Oddly enough, Mass Effect 2 is actually probably my least favorite of the three, because I think the story is pointless, and I hate how drawn out it feels. On the other hand, it also has some of the best character moments of the whole trilogy, and there's stuff I really do like about it. But it's Mass Effect 2. It's most people's favorite game of the three of the trilogy, and I was kind of hoping that maybe we'd get some tidbit of news for the next game, but I think they're going to hold off on that for this summer and for N7 Day this November. I did put out a couple Mass Effect videos this week. One talking about can Shepard be replaced, where I talk a lot about the legend of Shepard, and the issues they had replacing Shepard with Andromeda, and how I think they should handle it going forward. I also did a video about bringing the galaxies together. Mike Gamble, who's the lead of the next Mass Effect, has done a ton of hinting and winks suggesting that they're going to combine the galaxy somehow to introduce the two stories in some capacity. And so I talk about, I think, 5 or 6 different ways I think they can do that, what I think is wrong with most of those, and why I support one, and what I hope they do. So you can check those out on YouTube. Just look up Bon Diesel, and they are my 2 most recent videos. Okay, so wrapping up a few stories here. There's Far Cry rumors, the Ubisoft game. So the 7th game is said to be in development right now. And there is a separate extraction-based multiplayer game that's also in the Far Cry chain being developed. That's a big deal because they've tried to have the multiplayer be part of Far Cry as long as I can remember. And basically after 3, it's been bad. It hasn't been good. Far Cry 5's multiplayer was abysmal. The DLCs were abysmal. Far Cry 6 was the same boat. And so I think it's really smart for them to separate out those projects. I really hope they're trying to do something new with Far Cry. I know the people who played Far Cry 6 seem to be like, it's a really good Far Cry game, but it didn't really feel like it had like pushed anything forward, which some people are fine with and other people obviously weren't. The really, really, really interesting tidbit about this that has been reported pretty widely is that the next Far Cry will be on Ubisoft Massive's Snowdrop engine. That's the engine that the Division 1, Division 2, Avatar, the new Star Wars game, as well as a bunch of other games, a South Park game, a Star Trek VR game. I said a while ago that it seemed like Ubisoft was going to try to use Snowdrop the way that EA has tried to use Frostbite, by basically putting all of their games in their whole publisher ladder into one engine, so that they, 1, don't have to pay someone else for their engine technology, and 2, can kind of collaborate between studios when they're trying to make games, so that they can kind of use each other to improve this engine. The Snowdrop engine is created, maintained, and improved by an internal team at Ubisoft Massive. So if you think about that massive studio, if you walk through that studio, they are working on the Division 2 still. They are working on a Star Wars game. They're finishing up Avatar. They I don't know if they still work on Ubisoft Connect or not, but they used to be the studio that did that. And they're doing this they're working on the engine. They're developing the Snowdrop engine, and there was rumors that they were working on like a AAA or a AA indie game. My guess is the 7 games that were canceled in the last year, that was probably one of them. So, but that's still, 5 huge projects they're working on. So I've said it for a long time. Ubisoft Massive is like the Respawn of Ubisoft. And if you get to know the culture of Massive and get to know the people who work there, I honestly think it's because it seems like they're kind of almost like separate from Ubisoft. Like the way that it seems like Respawn kind of does their own thing and EA just kind of checks in, sort of. It seems like that's how Ubisoft is with Massive as well. And it seems like it works. So in a time where Ubisoft is struggling, can't do anything interesting, can't put out any good games, because it kind of seems like they have their thumb on all of these like 50 studios they own, it seems like Massive manages to, just take things a step further, to do things a bit better. And I really hope they continue to do that with the Avatar game, with the Star Wars game, and with the development of Snowdrop. And I hope that we see more of Ubisoft's games move to Snowdrop, because it's a beautiful engine. And the more of them that are using that engine, the better that engine's going to get and more refined it's going to get. So if we see a Division 3 or something one day, it's only going to be better. So Gears of War 6 was possibly confirmed. There was a leaked photo that basically suggested, it looks like it's like a graphic for a showcase. So maybe they're working on like an E3 showcase that showed a Gears of War like collection where they're going to revamp all the old games to like modern standards. And then it also had a frame for Gears of War 6. I don't think anyone should be surprised if there's a Gears of War 6. It seems like a assumed game in development, but we haven't actually heard anything about it yet. So I'm definitely curious about that. 343 confirms that it's continuing to make Halo games, and it will continue to work on the franchise. Last week, due to the layoffs and stuff like that, there were rumors that Halo was going to get taken over by another studio, that 343 might get shut down or might get reassigned. And this was them coming out and saying like, nope, we're still working on it. Now, they didn't necessarily say that like they're the only ones that will be working on it moving forward. I suspect that's a more complicated situation than we realize. I think that big changes are happening, but they seemed very confident to say that they're still working on it, and there's no reason to not believe them for now. Marvel's Avengers will come to end of life in September of this year, 2023. The much maligned Marvel's Avengers game that basically tried to be Destiny for the Marvel series and failed pretty miserably, not because it was bad, but because they literally put out no content for it, or at least no good content. What's really interesting about them saying it's over is that I believe they're delisting the game in September, which I assume means that they're going to shut down the servers for it, which means that not only will they not be making more content for it, there's a good chance that in the next year, the game that people paid $60-$70 for and maybe paid money for cosmetics and stuff will not only be ceasing development, but will not work anymore, because most games nowadays use servers for AI or for streaming data or something. And if they shut down those servers, you cannot play that game at all, even by yourself. So lessons learned, I hope. And then the final story here is that GoldenEye 007 has been released on Xbox and I think on Nintendo as well. This has been a really long saga where the company who made that legendary game on the N64 was Rare. Rare is now owned by Xbox, but the rights to the 007 game are still owned by Nintendo. So I guess for years, Xbox has been trying to get this game onto Xbox, and Nintendo was being weird about it. They finally let it happen, but there's a bunch of jank around it. You can't play multiplayer on the Xbox version, but then the Nintendo version allows you to. Doesn't make any sense. There's just a bunch of wonkiness about it. Regardless, I did play a little bit last night. I didn't want to download it, so I streamed it, and it works great. I streamed it through Game Pass, and it worked really, really well. And honestly, it's really fun. And it has on Xbox, has the proper controls, like a modern game now. And so it's the shooting and stuff is way more satisfying. It's a blast. I doubt I'm gonna like finish it, but I was having a lot of fun just playing it. It's hard. It's a hard game. You forget that games of those eras of the N64, the PS1, the Genesis and stuff, those games were just really hard. And so as a kid, I just couldn't beat them. And so I would get mad and give up. And as an adult, I'm like too stubborn to do that, but I see why I did quit back when I was a kid. So if you want to get your GoldenEye fix, it's on Xbox and Nintendo. This week, we didn't have any listener questions or polls. If you have any listener questions, if you have topics you want me to cover, if you have news stories you want me to cover, let me know over on Twitter and the YouTube comments in my Discord. I ask for that stuff in all of those places. And because this is a solo podcast, that's the discourse that we get to have. So I hear from you through the questions and the topics and the comments, and then you hear back from me. So please give me those questions, and I will be happy to answer them. As for content updates, not really anything. Long story short, and I'll update it. I'll update this when everything comes to fruition. But long story short, there's been kind of like a personal medical situation going on, not with me, but within the family. And I'm kind of waiting until that gets fully resolved, until I really get back into streaming and stuff. Otherwise, I'd rather be spending time with people and doing that stuff. So I'll try to stream. I'm probably going to stream today, probably tomorrow. I think I'm getting back into it because the situation is being relieved. But I think the podcast and the videos on YouTube are going to take priority, and basically I'll stream when I can. So hopefully I can soon. And that's kind of what I have. So thank you so much for listening. And I'm happy to get any feedback on the show that you have about the podcast, about my videos, about things that I can talk about. I think my YouTube, I think this podcast, I think even my stream when I do it are in a really good spot. It's just I've been around for a while, and it's hard to regain any momentum that I lost back like when my daughter was born and I basically blew all this stuff off. It's like it feels like I'm starting from scratch again, and that's what we're going to have to do. So anyway, you can help by sharing stuff, by liking tweets I make, by commenting on stuff. All of that stuff helps, and I would really appreciate it. You can find me all over the internet as Bond Diesel, including on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. And that's all I have. So until next time.